psychological experiment called inattentional blindness. An experimental leader asks a random subject on the street how we could find a street on the map. Suddenly, a piece of furniture is brought in between the subject and the experimental leader. The experimental leader is then exchanged into another experimental leader without the subject noticing that a completely other person is standing in front of him. The expectation that it must be the same person is so strong that it will override all information suggesting that the new person is standing there. The way our brain models our experience of the world is a core process and probably partly depend on the dopamine neurotransmitter system. A dopamine molecule is shown in figure 122, the upper part. When this system does not work properly, we can start experiencing delusions and hallucinations such as schizophrenia. Our understanding of the world becomes more and more disorganized. As an example of this, the artist Louis Wayne, who liked to paint cats, is shown in his actually paintings of cats is shown on page 122, the lower part of the page. He became more and more psychotic and continued painting cats, but the creatures also became more and more disorganized, and in the end, when he was most psychotic, it was not even possible to actually picture a cat. Although for that the quality of the picture was not lower anyhow. So what about art and expectations? Well, I believe that our expectation of art is also much dependent, our experience of art is also much dependent on our expectations. Expectations shapes our experience of art and fills in what is missing. It adds color to grayscales. It adds sounds to silence. It adds thoughts and feelings to emptiness. So in other words, art never stands alone. It's a composite, or a sum, if you so will, of all our previous experiences added to the specific piece of art. And the expectation can be so strong, so our whole reasoning about the piece actually is shaped on what and how we would like it to be. A dream. A confabulation, but true. Yes, indeed, highly truthful in an extremely subjective world.
Something has just occurred to me, Predrag. You know, when I think about these experiments and read about these experiments where the subject is kind of tricked in a way into, you know, thinking that they've chosen a woman in a photograph, and then they're presented with another woman and they think it's the same person. I've always thought that this was a fault in a way, that we weren't being attentive or accurate enough. And it's just occurred to me that in fact that's really not how it's supposed to be, that we are supposed to make these mistakes, that is the natural state, that we live in a fragmented situation, and that in fact it would be the impossibility for things to be coherent and not to be tricked in some way.
Yeah, I think I would completely agree with you.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Another thing that came to mind, I'm not quite sure about the idea of expectation, is that it made me remember when I was a teenager, I saw on a variety show, they had the best billiards and snooker player in Australia, and his name was Horace Lindrum, and he was about to give a demonstration of him being the world champion snooker player. And suddenly the host, the comedian host of the show, said to the audience, "Say miss, 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 miss." And so the whole audience is chanting miss, miss, miss to the world's greatest snooker champion, and he just miscues the ball and it just goes all over the place like that. And the thing that really interested me about it was that the host and the audience were all completely horrified. There was no, that somehow I think we were thinking that if you went miss, 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 he was still going to be the greatest champion or something.
So we'll present our third case study now, which may require a little bit of sound tweaking, I'm not sure.
From Tomo. Yeah. And the thing is that Jackie and I are now in skeleton costumes. We've changed out of our tree and Adam and Eve costumes, and we're now in two different types of skeleton costumes. Hers is a kind of X-ray, and mine is a glow-in-the-dark skeleton costume. And thinking about Horace Lindrum before is that we're actually going to sing now, and I've never sung publicly before without having drunk alcohol before, so you're going to hear something we're all going to hear something. Oh, sorry, Jackie, can we just go back? Sorry. I just wanted to tell you something. The thing is that this song is called Long Distance Call, and it's written by McKinley Morganfield, Muddy Waters, in the 50s. And it's talking about the idea about the space between two people when they make a long distance call, and it's what you might call a rhythm and blues song. And rhythm and blues made a very interesting transition around like World War II or something, where they started to take a lot of gospel music, like Jesus Loves Me, you know, I Need Jesus and things like that, and turned them into kind of songs about sexuality, where they'd go, oh, I got a woman, I need love, and particularly kind of sexual love like that. And so a lot of these rhythm and blues songs are highly sexualized and very much about the temporal world rather than the spiritual world and about the world kind of right here and now, but usually related quite distinctly to sexuality. And we thought that the idea of a long-distance call was now related, that so much of us spend so much time phoning, Skyping and all of these kind of things, that it would be really interesting to see this relation and its excitements as being not so much about the sexual relation, but a material relation about whether you're connected or not. So we'll just do it the second time now. Say you want to hear me? Please call me on the phone sometime.
You said you'd get back to me.
You said you'd get back to me.
I'm here.
So please,
I said,
why don't you call me on the phone?
I'm here now.
When I hear your voice,
I can hear you. I can hear you.
and ease my worried mind. Well, I look at my computer. Now it doesn't seem like there's anyone there at all.
I'll know once we get started.
Looking at my laptop.
I know. Good, I know.
Now it doesn't seem like there's anyone there at all.
We'll both know once we get going.
I push and prod my email. But it doesn't seem like there's no one there at all. I see you on the Skype. The symbol screen, you pretend that you're not there.
It's like a sock turned inside out.
I see you on the Skype.
It's like a sock turned inside
I know that you're online. Why don't you want to talk to me?
You inside, out, outside, in.
If you're busy, I really don't mind.
I'm here.
My phone ringing. I want to get a long distance call. When I pick up the receiver, I imagine you're there. It says you're busy. My email won't reply.
Hello.
You said you'd call me Tuesday.
Hello.
You said you'd get back to me. It's been 3 weeks. I'm a cuckold to your world. Skype me, call me in, away, not available. Do not disturb, invisible, translate for me. I'm a cuckoo. I'm a cuckold. I'm your cuckold in this world. Someone is cheating me. Someone is cheating me somewhere out there. Someone's cheating for me. Bunga bunga! Bunga bunga! It's a state of nature. It's a state of nature for you, and it's a state of nature for me, but not for everyone. We rest our case.
All right. Jeff, thank you for that. That was great, refreshing. And I think you have a career as a musician as well. Well, anyway, I think you touched also upon something which is quite interesting, what is happening now in the culture, that you have a lot of interaction on internet media, etc. Many new types of media forms are coming up and connecting different people, different individuals. And I think it has been brought forward by a scientist I respect very, very much, called Chris Frith, that we should actually not view we should not study individuals' brains, because it's not interesting. Individuals' brains are not there to be individual. They are there to be interconnected with other brains. And so how we should see it is actually not one brain, but several brains that are actually always interacting in a complex machinery. So one unit is actually all the ones who are interacting. Now, of course, we were made maybe to interact with not as many people as we interact now, but still, even through internet, etc., we are using what our brains are made for, connecting them to other brains in a single unit. That was the comment I had.
Okay, well, I think it's really interesting to think now that, well, the thing that first came to mind when you say that is that when people think of a group activity or we think of a mass activity, which I guess is what we're talking about as joined brains, that it's somehow to do with something corrupted or the mob or something like that, that it's not often, since Jung or in these kind of ways, presented it as anything that could be a generative mass, something that could be kind of actually doing something. I suppose for me, like rather than being interested so much in Jung's ideas where they have a generative origin or a place like of figures and types where things come from, what interests us in our work particularly, if I'm still on the subject, is the idea about how we are together, like now, that we kind of are together, and I'm kind of anxious about it, even in a sense, that how can that be represented? Like that when we're together, is it just a straightforward physicality, or do we have other ways, material and otherwise, to talk about the ways that we kind of exist or produce something together? So the fact that this could have like a reality or a physicality in biological terms is obviously really interesting.
Yeah, I think that this is actually a prime example of that a lot of times art and science actually goes together and tries to explore a very similar question, and of course in a different way. And I have to say that sometimes I'm also quite envious on you, because you don't have the boundaries that we have somehow put upon us. You can explore in a much more creative way.
But we don't get paid, Predrag.
Yeah, that's why. Well, but I have to say that for me at least, the scientist I like most are the ones that can actually break the boundaries that are in science and that way come forward. Right, so maybe I should start with my last case.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. The last case, probing the boundaries of performance of art, health, and morality. The next talk concerns, or line of thoughts, concerns the boundaries of performance of art. This is a wide topic, but I will discuss it from two dimensions, i.e. art and morality and art and health. A debate article published recently in one of the Swedish daily newspapers got a lot of attention this Christmas. The debate article dared to go into an already infected debate, that one of computer game violence. Our new contribution was to bring in cognitive brain function, brain development, and brain plasticity into the debate. We argued that there are several processes in the brain that are established during childhood and that could be affected in a negative way from computer games with extreme violent and realistic content. In the present forum and discussion, it is not interesting to argue whether we are right or not. However, some other aspects are interesting to bring up in order to probe the boundaries of art. Many influential individuals consider computer games in general as a form of art, and our article was accused by them to have a hidden anti-cultural agenda. It was said that we were men in white coats hiding behind our expertise in brain function and working against the culture of millions of people. An official voice even stated that talking about computer games as a health issue rather than a media issue is unique in the democratic world and hard to reconcile with the Swedish right of expression. According to this idea, we would not be allowed to debate the health issue of cigarette commercials since they could also be considered as art and thus untouchable. So it seems that art has rights of its own that are non-touchable. The boundaries are infinite. Where are they? What are the boundaries of art? And one, as you see, seems to be the boundary in between freedom of expression and health concerns. Another could be a moral boundary. The computer games that we talked about are not the average one. They involve extreme and brutal violence. For example, in one such game, the player is given a chainsaw. His mission is to kill as many civilians as possible and as quickly as possible with the chainsaw. He runs around in the town square and chops off hands and arms and heads as quickly as possible, and as the blood flows on the street, he gets points. Everything is so realistic that it's hard to distinguish it from reality. Is this art? As I have pointed out before, I considered art as something very subjective in the eyes of the beholder. So actually, I am not in the position to tell you whether this is art or not. However, some of our opponents in the debate seem to argue that this is art. At the same time, we happened also to refer to another type of computer games, those containing sexual assault and rape. Although we only mentioned those games in our article, another storm of protest emerged. How could we possibly put those games next to our beloved games of fictional violence? Those were a disgrace for the whole industry of computer games and restricted to a few rather sick people. A famous Swedish journalist and computer game reviewer, probably with a very good relation to the computer game industry, wrote. From a moral reasoning, this is a very interesting issue. Those people argue that it is morally okay to use a chainsaw and chop up people in pieces, since it's only fiction and culture, but at the same time, disgusting to rape games, even in a virtual reality. It was almost as they said that extreme violent computer games are culture, but rape games are not. However, in most societies, including the Swedish one, rape, no matter how horrible it is, will often give a lesser penalty than chopping up people with a chainsaw. Anyhow, one could argue that one must take a stand and either agree that both are fictive forms of art and therefore should be protected as a freedom of expression, or that no one is morally justifiable. So are there other moral boundaries of art? The girl from the art school in Stockholm performing an art project where she played a suicidal and aggressive patient and was taken to a psychiatric clinic by force and given dangerous intramuscular anxiolytic drugs against her will. She was accused that she had put herself and others into dangers, but defended herself with the statement that this was art and therefore okay. The Jewish artist coloring a pond blood red and putting a toy sailing boat picturing a female Hamas suicide bomber on the sail. According to the furious ambassador from Israel who saw it, this was definitely not art, but a humiliation towards the killed Jewish families. What about the propaganda art of Stalin and Lenin? At the time of the communistic Soviet Union, people in Western countries would not consider that as art. But today, it is considered as art by many in the West. Were Hitler's parades acts of art? Well, some at that time would probably agree that those were the highest possible forms of art. What about the Nazi burning of bad books? Hopefully no one would agree. What about the very recent story of the fashion designer who said he loved Hitler? Does his artful collection suddenly cease to be art? What about the recent debate of manga series portraying pedophilia? Some would agree that they represent art and others would not. What about portraying Muhammad the Prophet as a villain? More people would agree that it's art in Western countries than in Muslim countries. What about portraying Jesus as a rapist? Well, less people would agree that it's art in Western countries. Probably the strongest protesters would be the same individuals that would agree that it was art to portray the Prophet Muhammad as a crook. And it never ends. And of course, there are no real answers. And possibly this is the necessity, since art should always question and start debates, even about the mere existence of itself. However, it also brings us to the question whether art always morally justifiable per definition, whether it's isolated from being dangerous to our health, whether it's always protected as a freedom of expression and speech. One suggestion would be to view the problem from a multidimensional perspective. We could introduce different axes, X, Y, and Z. The X-axis is defining what is art and what is not. This axis is highly subjective. It is defined by an individual. Often smaller or larger groups of individuals would agree while others would not. I will therefore never be able to tell someone what he should consider as art or not. The other axis, Y, could be defined as a moral axis. Also, this one is individual-centered, but large groups of individuals and societies could discuss and sometimes even agree on what is moral and what is not. Such discussions would probably benefit the society. The last axis, the Z-axis, is dealing with health. What could be considered as dangerous or not. In this way, it would actually be possible to define something as art, i.e. in the x-axis, although it's not moral, i.e. y-axis, and even not good for your health, i.e. z-axis. That way, it would be easy to discuss extreme violent computer games in a more complex way than certain journalists in the daily news do.
So, Peter, are we going outside or we talk? We're going.
Definition of art.